Good morning.
Good morning.
I tested negative and I'm
Morning.
speaking, so I will remove my mask, but I'm sorry to say that I'm the substitute teacher this morning because Betsy Simmons came down with a case of COVID. And today there was supposed to be a concert out in Goshen at the Institute for Musical Arts with Chris Williamson, and the director of the IMA got COVID after all this time, so they called off that concert. And so we're basically in the upswing. Franklin County went from low risk to the low end of medium risk this week with 150 cases per 100,000, which is still pretty low odds, all things considered. But we do ask you to wear masks, and when we do refreshments, we'll do them out in the open air, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. So we ask that everyone be fully vaccinated and, where possible, outside of your own group, preserve a social distance. We are going to, I don't think we have singing this morning. We did decide to open it up a little bit and allow singing with masks on, but I think we are not doing, I see no hymns in the order of service, so that's the way it is. Fortunately, we do this out of abundant care for all of our members and visitors and families and everybody they come into contact with. So thank you for helping to preserve the health of this community. We take this out of, the other thing is we don't have any kind of, the ceiling fans are the only ventilation we have, and we can't really open the windows in this temperature, so that's an aspect. Anyway, from this safe distance, we still have the joy of coming together, and we want to make sure all of you feel welcome. Everyone feels welcome here. So look around in the four directions and welcome or greet those who are with us this morning. And hello to, last time I saw we have 3 or 4 people on Zoom. Thank you for coming out or going online with us this morning. And Kate is handling the technical duties this morning. And if this is your first visit here this morning, please sign the guest book if you'd like us to contact with you. And there's pamphlets in the front entrance and in the pew backs. So, and we're grateful to Julia Bady for blessing us with her music. And we also, as one of the fold, you'll see in your order of worship, there is a program that's going to happen on Friday, October 28th with her. And so we encourage everyone to do that at the Northampton Music Center, Community Music Center. And now, I invite everyone to breathe, especially me. It's been a heck of a morning. Breathe deep, come into the room, be present, be at peace. And in the words of the Reverend Kathleen McTeague, we come together this morning to remind ourselves to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see communion. This house of laughter and silence, memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Let us take this time for quiet reflection as we listen in silence to the prelude. Thank you. I wanted to have that moment. Appreciate it. My name is Dan Tinen, and I've been a member of All Souls since I moved here from the Los Angeles area in 1998. Seen a lot of changes in that time here in Greenfield, although I think fewer changes than I would have seen if I'd stayed in the West Coast. One of the 6 sources of our Unitarian Universalist faith is spiritual teachings of earth-centered traditions that celebrate the sacred circle of life and instruct us to live in harmony with the rhythms of nature. And this morning, I looked out my window and onto the roof, and there was frost on the roof, and out in the yard there was frost on the grass, and the temperature had gone down just to 32 degrees. The sun is on its journey southward. We passed the equinox, the equal day and equal night, about 2.5, 3 weeks ago. And in a lot of ways, this is the median of our time. It's neither too hot nor too cold. We do have to have a little bit of heat in the mornings now. But we're in the long sleeve time, so these are also the days here in New England when our towns become tourist attractions with the leaves turning and the leaf peepers out. And in the end, what we're seeing is the decay of the chlorophyll, which powers all life on Earth, giving up its labors for this season. Let's see here. Oops. Will you please get out your order of worship, and we're going to read together sort of an abbreviated version of our congregational covenant, which is the promise we make to each other to be an organization for the common good. We covenant with one another that we build our connections on a foundation of love, hope, and faith, to promote justice and peace, and to show reverence for the divine within and all around us. And let's follow with the chalice lighting, which is a ritual of all Unitarian Universalist churches. Read along with me, please. We light this chalice to honor us all, coming out of isolation, trauma, shame, pretending, coming into who we truly are, and coming out is recovery and celebration. We are not breaking down, we are breaking through, breaking like the dawn. We're not falling apart, we're falling into place, claiming our soul, our sexual, social, emotional, spiritual selves. Becoming is a lifelong process. And though that was the prelude to Betsy's sermon, it's curiously appropriate for mine. I should say a little bit about who I am. I said I've been a member here. I also have been a pinch hitter as a lay preacher many times for a period of time when we were between ministers here at All Souls. I would preach on a monthly basis for that year, and I have also gotten to know our other UU congregations, Bernardston Unitarian and First Parish Northfield, and I preach at those parishes once a month, and they're all part of the greater UU community of Franklin County, which I encourage everyone to check out. My talk this morning, see what time, I want to make sure I got the time here. Okay. I'm not forgetting anything, am I? All right. A lot of young people, teenagers and young adults in our community and our country are in pain. They're anxious, depressed, feeling hopeless. Now, COVID made it worse because they weren't able to hang out with their friends and share their problems, and social isolation is always a difficult thing for human beings. But this general problem has been endemic for a long time. Before the pandemic, 1 out of 5 teenagers had symptoms of depression. And suicide is the 3rd leading cause of death among young adults and teenagers, And the second leading cause is homicide, which I'd submit is a fellow traveler of depression and anxiety and disconnection. Why is this? Can we do anything about it? What's wrong? What is causing so much pain in kids who have their whole life in front of them in the view of us old folks? Now, social media is certainly part of it. It is also the state of the world we're living in, but that got me thinking back to my high school and college days, and I had struggles, emotional struggles from my parents had gotten divorced and we were in declining economic circumstances. I had a lot of questions about things. Well, today's kids now have to worry about COVID. They're worried about climate change in a way we were only dimly aware of. They're aware of the racism and the defects of racism in our country and all over the world. But is that all so much worse than what my generation faced? We were very close to thermonuclear war, which has raised its ugly head again, that possibility. We also had to face the idea that we might grow up and graduate and be sent to Vietnam. But every generation faces an uncertain, dangerous world. And it's in the nature of being an adolescent to be a little afraid of the future because you're old enough to realize all the bad things that could happen, but you don't have all the skills you might need to deal with those potential dangers. So we were right to feel anxious then, and they're right to feel anxious today. But what I'm focusing on is that what's missing in today's environment that I had as a kid personally, and I think a lot more people did, that today's kids by and large have less and less of. Something that's outside of their family, their school, their friends, that cares about them and supports them. Now, 52 years ago, when I was a junior in high school, Simon and Garfunkel released the record Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And that song offers a kind of comfort, promise that you have someone that will help you cross that bridge and come out on the other side of your pain. Paul Simon wrote, "When you're weary, feeling small, when tears are in your eyes, I will dry them all." Well, who's drying the tears of kids today? Well, sometimes your family, but not everything is Leave It to Beaver. And if your parents are so involved with their own emotional challenges, kids don't feel like they can add to that burden. An 18-year-old girl said, if I open up to my parents and tell them how I feel, it'll make them feel that they've failed. In too many cases, the family is the problem that the teenager is facing. A mother who's having a nervous breakdown, a father who's drinking too much, a sister or brother who's getting involved with drugs and dangerous behavior. So who can take that role of nurturing if your parents aren't nurturing? Well, there's always teachers, and some teachers are capable of lending a helping hand to students now and then, but they have a lot of students to deal with. And your English teacher, can you open up to him or her when you're dependent on them for your grade? Teachers have a very difficult job to do as it is. And in most cases, students change teachers every year. So your 10th grade teacher doesn't know what you went through as a 9th grader. Now, extracurricular activities, there's a little bit more stability there, a little bit more support from your sports coach, your theater director, your music teacher. But it's hard to get individual attention when the focus is on winning the next game or having a great dress rehearsal. Well, what about the government? Can kids take their problems to some government agency? Not unless it rises to the level of legal action and you get the DCFS involved. What about if they're in a crisis, can they see a psychiatrist? The median wait time to see a psychiatrist for the first visit is 50 days. At some hospitals around here, it's 6 months to a year. We're very lucky have clinical and support options that is trying to see people while they're in crisis and arrange treatment for them. Anyway, a lot of teenage angst doesn't rise to the level of clinical. So who's on their side when times get tough and pain is all around? Well, they turn to their friends, but there's only so much that one 15-year-old can do to help another 15-year-old. I'm going to tell a story about a friend of mine in high school, and I bet everybody here in the congregation and on Zoom has a similar story about a friend who was struggling with life. In my case, he was a talented musician. He had a great record collection, and he'd listen to music all the time up in his room. We played in bands together. But as early as sophomore year, he started drinking and skipping school sometimes. He would filch a little beer from his parents' stash, and later on he had a trick of growing marijuana under the stairs in the basement. And he got a reputation even among the other kids of just being a little too unreliable to keep in a band. I think all of our friends, our peer group, knew something was going on with him, and we wanted to help him. We tried him. We talked to him sometimes in the way the kids do. But we were 16, 17. Anyway, this guy never got on track. He never went to college, couldn't hold a job, lived with his parents even after the rest of us had graduated from college. And eventually he was arrested for forging prescriptions for OxyContin, and he deliberately overdosed himself rather than face jail. Most kids don't fail in life because they don't know algebra, medieval history, or physics. They fail for emotional, psychological, and spiritual reasons that derail them from having productive, constructive, happy lives. Human development is a very complicated and tricky thing, and our society doesn't really pay much attention to it. Now, churches like these may seem like outdated institutions that are hobbled by our past, but churches, synagogues, mosques are still the institutions that are closest historically and emotionally to these kinds of problems. In a traditional society, this place 100, 200 years ago, the parish minister would notice kids like my friend and try to pull them together. Underneath all the religious trappings of stained glass, statue, holy books, complicated creeds, is a human desire to be part of a community that can be that bridge over troubled waters that sometimes flow through every human life. And the role of a priest, rabbi, or minister is a lot more concerned with the care of souls than it is about doctrine and theology in real life. Actual religious life, I submit, is a lot more like, did you ever see the old Bing Crosby movie, Going My Way, from 1943? No, it's a lot more like that Bing Crosby movie than it's like King of Kings. Now, in that movie, Crosby plays a young priest who comes to assist an old one and reinvigorate the parish that's fallen on hard times. And in the course of things, he turns a neighborhood gang of boys into a wonderful boys' choir. And a lot of it is this old priest resisting the young priest's new ways, but they come to an understanding, and eventually the church is saved by paying off its mortgage. But the point is, in Going My Way, even though it takes place in a church with priests as the main characters, it's about relationships, not about miracles or divine intervention. And I would say that 95% of real religious life in an institution is like that. Pastoral care doesn't get as much attention as theology does, but we do require it in our denomination. the role of the entire religious community in the support and development of young people is something that's been underappreciated. And that's maybe one of the things that is missing, and I'll get into more of that, in that sense of despair among young adults. Now, when I was in high school, and as I said, I was having, I had depression and anxiety. And one of the ways I got relief from that was being part of a youth group, a religious youth group. And one of my friends' parents would open up their home on Friday evenings, and we'd have a meeting called a fireside with both adults and kids. And we'd talk about various topics, with some sort of religious in there. But I don't remember the theology as much as I remember drinking punch and having cookies over candlelight and talking about things. And hearing concepts from adults that allayed my fears. And in particular, our high school group had a young woman named Joan. She lived in an apartment above the drugstore a couple blocks from my high school. And we would go over there for meetings and stuff. And she was open even if we felt like talking. We could go up and knock on Joan's door. She'd invite us in for tea and cookies, She's not a teacher. She's not getting paid for this. She's not a minister. She's not part of your family. Having an adult like that who cares to just sit down with you and talk for 15 minutes, that's a wonderful thing that I think would help a lot of kids today. And I think, by the way, I think Joan probably became a minister or a therapist after that. The challenges of every generation are daunting and scary, but as we've become a more secular society, we have less of that kind of resource. A healthy religious community lets kids see that they're adults with a different perspective from their parents, who have different jobs, houses, and values, have a wider range of ages, and it gives kids a larger palette of ideas about what they want to do with their lives. Now, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's particularly poignant here at All Souls. When I came here in 1988, we had a very active religious education program. The rooms downstairs, there was the Rainbow Room, and for one age group, and there was the Nature Room for another group. And we had a number of young families in the church, and those classrooms downstairs were filled every Sunday with, I think we had 4 or 5 different classes. Now, you don't know what you've got till it's gone, and it's gone. It's not just a matter of young families, not going to church. It's a matter of people being so scheduled with soccer games and special tutoring and all kinds of clubs that they just don't have time for the kind of thing we had 20, 25 years ago. And I'm not saying that teenagers and young adults just need to follow Jesus and they'll be okay. Now, while I do believe that religious ideas play an important role in people's psychic life, I've come to realize that the theology is really, in some ways, a cover story for a therapeutic community that cares for its members, provides resources, fellowship, and understanding, and maybe some helpful advice now and then. It's a backup in society for family and school and friends that's faded. The other thing that's important to know about young people is there is Piaget talked about this, a psychologist of human development, that a lot of kids go through a period of wanting to reform the world, of wanting to be part of something bigger than themselves that gives purpose and meaning to life. But those theologies or ideas that a church we used to teach in Sunday school, I'd say they matter less than just the fact of the community. Now, when I lived in California, I mentored a UU youth group, say that 5 times fast, at Neighborhood Church in Pasadena, Neighborhood is a big, beautiful church, sort of near the Rose Bowl. And for several years, I spent Sunday mornings in the beautiful living room of the parish house with 6 to 12 teenagers who were draped on the floor or on the couch and talking about all kinds of things. My co-teacher and I would come in with some kind of idea to kick off the class, and sometimes the kids would follow that lead, and the majority of times they wouldn't have anything. They weren't into it at all, and we'd have to go in a different direction. Very often it turned into a kind of encounter group or AA meeting rather than religious education with a curriculum we had to get through. As adults, Melanie and I did the same thing that Joan did for me in her apartment on afternoons. We were there to listen, comment maybe a little bit, draw out kids who weren't speaking very much, and be a resource. The question is, did it do any good? I think so. The kids kept coming back of their own free will. In a liberal church like ours, your parents don't drag you here. So the kids must have gotten something out of it. I had a little bit of training and not much, but sometimes when kids would tell stories like, well, last night my friends and I were out on the beach until midnight, and then I had to get home, so I hitchhiked back to Pasadena from the beach. And I'm going, oh my God, she's alive. Or a friend of mine got a pen and did a tattoo on my back. Did you have any rubbing alcohol to sanitize the pen? The other thing about that time in my life was, have you ever heard of mini-cons? Mini-cons are a Unitarian thing where, say you have 8 or 10 churches in an area, each with its own youth group, and they all come to one of the churches on a Friday night and they stay till Sunday morning. It's like a big co-ed slumber party with a bunch of very tired adults sleeping on couches. And we also in Los Angeles, there was a place sort of like Row Camp, de Benneville Pines, and we would go up there was a summer camp, a week-long summer camp with the kids. The secular world thinks about religious institutions as places where we try to convince you of things on the basis of inadequate evidence. Virgin births, miracles, transubstantiation, tablets out of burning bushes, resurrections, ascensions. And we don't fit that description. In some ways, maybe it's not so good we're called a church. It gives the wrong idea. But the loudest critics of religion, by and large, have missed the point that I'm trying to make about how religious societies and communities actually function in our society, and the legitimate purposes that all these institutions have served that have been fading. A modern church needs to be a place of psychological, not just spiritual growth. And before a person can become a UU minister, not only do they need a Master's of Divinity degree, they need to complete a clinical pastoral education program and an internship. And when we have that kind of professional ministry available to us and to the teens and young adults, it can make a real difference. Well, then we have to talk a little bit about the role of religious stories and, myths in the sense of stories that have lasted through generations and generations, and the role that those images about the sparrow functioning as anti-anxiety medications and stories for people. What are we going to put in the place of those stories that have eased the pain and the hopelessness of people for thousands of years? We have to do something. I think one of the conundrums our society is in right now that's coarsened our politics and led to this epidemic of emotional distress is the lack of that kind of institution. I'm not saying we can't go back to the old Sunday school model or the Hebrew school model. That clearly just doesn't work now, but we need to do something. The Unitarian minister Forrest Church once said that as he was writing a sermon, he tried to remember that out there in the pews, there were a few people with really difficult problems and broken hearts. Sometimes the UU denomination thinks everything is about social justice and righting the wrongs of the world, and those are part of the reason for a liberal church, but they're not the only reason. Religion is a kind of group therapy, after all. Adults come to services every week in a sense, for emotional maintenance and to form a community that can act in the world. And teenagers are especially in need of that therapeutic maintenance. And the decline of church membership and participation in religious groups by youths, it doesn't mean there's less religion in their lives. That vacuum will be filled by something. Sometimes it's filled by nihilism and hopelessness. In a few cases, it's filled by some sort of bizarre sect on the dark web that's looking to exploit people under the guise of spirituality. Well, you might ask why I chose this subject this morning. It's just that I think that the void, when I'm hearing these stories about the increasing rates of depression among young girls and suicides and homicides, it's made me aware of some of the good things that all religious institutions used to offer, and wonder how we could fill that void and provide teenagers and young adults, kids in college, with that bridge of support as they cross over into adulthood. So we need to creatively invent some new kind of institution or service that people are drawn to, that provides real benefits. And I'm talking about a community of caring adults that interact with kids, some rites of passage, a sense of wonder and transcendence, a sense of purpose and meaning, an antidote to hopelessness. That's desperately needed today. And I'm not proposing to turn back the clock or say that all the classrooms downstairs that are filled with the stone soup equipment should be turned back into classrooms. That's not going to happen and shouldn't happen. Our ministry is now about feeding people. But we do need to go, not just as a church, but as a whole society, on some sort of vision quest to build some kind of emotional, psychological resource for the kids who are facing the problems of growing up, and build something new out of the ashes of the old. So may it be so. Well, let's see here. I'm going for the offertory here. Every week in our church, we take up an offering which gives us an opportunity to exercise the generosity of spirit that supports All Souls and its many ministries. We see this act of giving, of growing more generous in our hearts and our actions, as essential to our spiritual well-being. And we will now receive this morning's offering. Individually and together, we're building a world filled with peace and justice, love and joy. Each one of you, by your commitment of time, talent, and treasure, helps make that grand vision real. Now is the time in our service for sharing joys and sorrows. If you have a sorrow that needs the help of this community to carry, or a joy so great that you must share it and make us all happy by doing that, now is the time. Do we have the candles? We don't have the candles at the side, do we? I'm sorry. We have a portable microphone, and do we have? This isn't a time for long personal or political announcements. We care for each other by being true to the purpose of this time, and we care for each other by our brevity. There'll be opportunity afterwards to share some announcements. And a very great joy we feel today is to have visitors to All Souls. During this time of joys and sorrows, we invite you to introduce yourself. And it's not required, but we'd still love to have the opportunity to welcome you. So now is our time for welcoming visitors and sharing joys and sorrows.
I'd like to light a candle of concern for Ellen Blanchette. She has COVID and she's at the Franklin Medical Center. But when I last talked to her yesterday, she was feeling a little better, but she is having a bad.
I guess I'll introduce myself. I am Frank from the Rowe Camp and Conference Center. You guys pretty much know what we do there. I do IT and facilities, and it's really nice to be here. I would like to light a candle of concern for some of my coworkers, Annie and Jason and their daughter Mo. They all caught COVID, and so now they're in quarantine, and just keep them in mind. And thank you for letting me be here.
Welcome.
Thank you, Dan. I loved the message of opportunity and how this church is a candidate to help our young people. I just went through a long 14-month housing search. And during that time, as we all know, the market was flooded with urbans trying to flee their cities. And Greenfield got quite a bit of that. I'd be interested in the data because they outbid all of us all the time. They have families. I'm certain they're looking for us. And this is the church shopping time as it is. So whatever we can do to engage with Sunday school, I do believe that there are those families that are looking for us. So I just love what you said, because it is true. We have a gift. We have a gift to give for our young people.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And then this is Sarah Hillier. She's here from Greenfield. Would you like to introduce yourself? She's good, thank you. We chop together on Fridays at Stone Soup. That's how we know each other.
Welcome.
Well, my name is Pam. I want to thank Dan for the service and also for just providing leadership for young people. It might have been California, it might not be here, but it's a different, it's the same thing. So in my life, I worked for the Center for Psychology and Social Change at Harvard Med School for about 5 years. And we were working on big issues like nuclear war, really scary stuff, right? And it was psychiatrists, really well-known psychiatrists. And the truth of the matter is that the depression that people felt was cast aside because we were so actively engaged. And it's in that context, I think, that we invite people into some bigger thing that really is bigger than ourselves. And I'm grateful for bringing up, but it's almost like blaming the victim. It's almost like the depression and things like that are not necessarily cured by listening. We are part of a bigger context, and we have a big challenge ahead of us, and we can invite people in. There are many, many avenues, and I'm grateful, really grateful for the community that we have now.
Thank you, Pam.
Hi, my name is Andrew Baker, and just wanted to share a joy that my son Isaac Baker, who some of you may know, he was raised up in this area and lives in Boston now, is getting married on next Sunday down at Woolman Hill, and so I won't be in church next Sunday, but but you'll know where I'll be.
Give him our best.
My name's Russ, and I didn't know that Betsy had COVID when I came to church this morning. I didn't read the last email completely, though when I did afterwards, I saw it just said that she was ill. It didn't say with what, but could you please light a candle for her? And yeah, for her. Thanks.
I'd like to light a candle, us to light a candle for all the victims of the conflict between Russia and Ukraine, victims on both sides, and decrying the destruction of things that support human life there just out of ideology. Kate?
Hi,
Lori?
Lori would
Lisa?
like to say something. Lori from the West Coast.
Yeah, hi.
So
Do you
I'm
hear
gonna
me?
Put her on speaker. I'm not sure.
Yeah, it should be on.
Oh,
I
great.
gotcha.
Hi, everyone. This is Lori in Chesaw, Washington. I spent my senior year of high school in Italy on the AFS program, so that family I lived with adopted me, and I adopted them, and I was all of 17, but I'm 67 and still in correspondence with them. And they live in Milano, and both parents are passed away a while back. But my two sisters are
Yeah,
still
we'll have to,
alive.
I'm sorry,
One's
we'll have to, it's,
I have a niece
oh, that's right.
who has had a bone marrow transplant, and she has an 8-year-old and a 3-year-old, and I would like to light a candle for her recovery. Please light a candle for her. A bone
We
marrow
have a candle
transplant
for
is
your
very
niece.
serious.
Okay, and now you can mute from that end.
Thank you so much, Lori, and sorry for the tech.
This has inspired me. I'd like to light one more candle. I
A
don't
little
know
louder, please.
I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but for myself, when I'm either listening to or on Zoom or what have you, when the technologies don't work as well as I'd like them to, and sounds go loud, soft, or images stop, or they jump or something, my system gets unnerved, and I can't get as much out of what the service is meant for as I'd like to. So if anybody else experiences that at all, it's not our fault, I don't believe. And I just kind of like would light a candle to just for symbolizing, we're trying. And sometimes things get in the way that are more than we can deal with personally. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. And it is good that we're having hybrid services instead of canceling. I mean, if we have real high numbers in November and December, we might have to just broadcast from the sanctuary with no people. That'll be a decision of the board. But at the moment, it looks like, because of the other precautions that are taken, that won't be necessary. Let's light one more candle to signify all those joys and sorrows that we carry with us unspoken. Spirit of community in which we share and find strength and common purpose, we turn our hearts and minds toward one another, seeking to hold in our hearts all of our joys and sorrows, both spoken and unspoken. Let us open our hearts and minds to the place of quiet, to the silent prayer for the healing of pain and the soft, gentle coming of love. And now, in your hymnal, there's an insert, there should be an insert, which Russ actually is very good about making sure it's there, called Prayer to Friends, and we'll sing that. Bring my life, born of hope, born of sand, learning joy where now there's strife. All I have, all I am. Help me to see what I must see. Help me to be where I must be. Restless faith abide till all are free. Fill my life, turn my hand. I just realized that I forgot one candle I was meaning to light. This past, actually a week ago, I found out that Ed Dawson, who was a tenor in our choir, I sang next to him for 10, 12 years, a wonderful man who was not only a good singer, but a very clever philosopher, and was always interested in talking about theology and politics and science. And he passed away about 2 weeks ago. So let's light one for Ed. It's going to be in May. Actually, he passed away in Andover, and I think that what I saw we'll post that in our. Let me see. Am I forgetting anything? Oh, I did. Julia did ask me to say we're going to change the song so that the last song will be "His Eye is on the Sparrow" by Sevilla Martin and Charles Gabriel. Right? The blessing of truth be upon us, the power of love direct us and sustain us. May the peace of this community preserve our going out and our coming in from this time forth until we meet again. Go in peace, create peace, be peace. Amen.